So welcome, everyone. My name is Marissa Freed. I'm the Assistant Director at MIT Hillel. We really appreciate everyone joining us this evening. And before we start, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of Jewish context about what we're doing this evening. So usually we think about Jewish culture as the applying of Jewish tradition or history or beliefs to cultural endeavors like dance or art or things like that. And tonight we're going to do something that's sort of the exact opposite. We're going to turn it on its head, which is very appropriate in time for the holiday of Purim. We'll give a little bit of credit to the Hamentasch team for the holiday of Purim. I'm a little biased. This is my team. Nobody else? Yes! So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to have MIT professors be applying their courses and their expertise to the Jewish foods of Hamentaschen and latkes. So we're excited to have everyone this evening. We're going to have everyone's going to be introduced as they come up to speak, but I'm going to first introduce our moderator for the evening. Bob Ferrara, who's in the class of 67. Bob is actually, he's the president, thank you. Bob is actually was the president of his graduating class and the 100th graduating class. It was very special. He also works at MIT. He works in alumni relations, and he oftentimes works with the alumni of fraternities, sororities, and independent living groups. So if you are in one of those, then your alumni are probably interacting with Bob on a regular basis. He was also on the basketball team when he was a student here. I don't know if we have any basketball players in the room or fans, basketball fans. Nobody. All right. And maybe most importantly, or how I know Bob, is because he has served on the MIT Hillel Board of Directors for many years now, and he is currently the treasurer. So without further ado, I will invite Bob up to moderate.
Thank you, Marissa. And let me add my welcome to this august gathering today. It's going to be an interesting, intellectually challenging evening for all of us. But to get started, we just need to thank a couple of people, too. Where's Elizabeth Katkoff, and who led this band of Hillel folks? Oh, she's still outside. Okay, and our Latke person is Ina Lipkowitz over here. And Jesse Michelle on the Hamentaschen side. And since this is a very special occasion, we have a special word from our leadership that I'd like to share with you. So this is our leader. In ceremonial garb, I mean, this is how he goes to the office. I don't know who's that with him. It's a Course 5 alum that somebody might know. So, as he does for all important MIT gatherings, he wants to welcome us. He'd love to be here himself, but he couldn't. So he sent a letter, which I am about to read to you right now. So it goes like this. Welcome, debaters, debate fans, and foodies. For more than 150 years, the world has looked to MIT for answers to complex questions. Again and again, we have delivered. Sequencing the human genome, no problem. New treatments for cancer, step this way. Detecting gravitational waves, piece of cake. But the eternal question, Latke-Hamentashen, oy vey. This evening, for the 14th time, you will tackle one of the most polarizing issues of our era. In one corner, Team Latke will promote the primacy of the potato pancake. In the And in the other, Team Hamentaschen will hail the heights of the hats of Haman. Ooh, that was it. And in the middle, Bob the Fair Ferrara, that's me, I guess, we'll try to keep the peace and keep both sides clean. So people of MIT, I implore you, the mishigas must end. We must have a chutzpah to decide once and for all, do we as a campus prefer the sweet and satisfying or the fried and the flavorful? The world is watching and I am counting on you. I regret that I cannot be with you this evening, but I have a previous commitment. The Chancellor and the Provost asked me to referee a private disagreement. I don't want to give too much away, but it appears to involve ho-hos and ding-dongs. As you can imagine, it has grown ugly. So I'm grateful for your dedication to this critical issue, and I'm sure the quality of your decision will leave MIT hungry for more. Signed, President L. Raphael Reif. So the President charged us with this struggle towards an answer, towards truth. I'd like to give a little bit of cultural, historical and cultural context, even though we're going to be talking mostly about something silly. There are roots to this whole thing. So the particular question of determining which Jewish food is superior, the Latke or the Hamentashen, has been with us for a long time. I mean, here at MIT, we've been working on it for 14 years. This is the 14th event, as you might have heard, as President Reif mentioned. But before that, the modern era of this debate began in my hometown, actually, at the University of Chicago, where they've been at it for 70 years. So they're doing something right now that we are doing, or right in this period. They aren't quite as quick as us. So, well, let's hope we've passed them up by now. Of course, before that, there was new modes of intellectual engagement that were constantly being invented by the Jewish people, particularly during this period, the Haskalah, if you recall, 200 and some years ago in Europe. And this fellow, Moses Mendelssohn, was a big part of that, so we're indebted to him, but even he didn't have the answer. To get even more data, we have to go further back to a very signal event in Jewish history, which perhaps had the answer, and that would have been Sinai. Not sure that it was there as well, but if you went a little further back, maybe it's in the roots of Mesopotamian culture at Ur, and where our ancestor Abraham took us. But let's switch to the cultural piece. Now, I come from a little different angle here because I was raised Catholic. I was not born Jewish, and so don't enjoy some of the knowledge of Jewish history and culture that you folks might. But I've been learning. And while I can't claim true objectivity, I don't think anybody can, I will bet a paycheck on at least 3 aspects of Jewish culture that really inform this debate and infuse its very spirit. And these would be Jews especially love to talk about food. And I'm only thankful we're not bringing up gefilte fish and kugel and lox and bacon. We'd be here all night. So fortunately, we're just going to stay with the 2. Another thing Jewish people love to, I don't have to tell you, this began with Jacob wrestling with an angel and has continued ever since. And finally, I would add, especially this community, nothing's settled. There's no dogma. We don't have there's no pope to say this is to end it forever. So we have to keep working on these issues. So we've got a tall order in front of us tonight. And then let's look at the MIT culture. Now that's something virtually everybody in this room shares, Jewish and non-Jewish alike. And it brings some special things to this party as well. I'm going to omit our eccentricities, which are many, and just concentrate on the positives. First, our scientific, engineering, social science, and humanities training urges us to consider all arguments. We must not foreclose outlandish ideas at the outset. So you're going to hear a lot of outlandish ideas, so don't foreclose. And you know, maybe there's some gravity waves in all this whole thing. So, second, we want an important corollary of that first thing, comes right along with it, is we get the best result when we involve multiple disciplines, and you're seeing that here as well. People from course, we don't have one from course 1 or 24, but we have a lot of folks in between. By the way, do people remember what course 24 is? Linguistics, philosophy, and which? And philosophy too, yeah. Noam Chomsky would want us to say all of that. So this multidisciplinary approach is important to our work, and you're going to hear it tonight. And finally, I would add that the MIT's mission compels us really to remember to address the major challenges of mankind, which is what we're trying to do. And it's right there in our mission statement. You can read the words yourself. So we're right in tune with that. And so we really got this incredible panel that we brought together, a multidisciplinary panel, and here they are. You're going to be hearing from each one of them shortly in turn. And just before we start, though, I do want to mention one other thing, is the rules. Not that we need rules, but we've had a few in the past, and we'll try to stick with them this time. The teams are going to alternate. It's going to start here, and then move here, and then back and forth. About 7 minutes each. Michael's agreed to be our little timekeeper, thank you. And then after that, there'll be a break. Maybe you can go grab a Latke or a Hamentashen. And then there's a 1-minute team rebuttal. It kind of sums everything up. And then a vote. And you know how to vote. These folks will help you in your voting, or give you some ideas as which way to vote. And then finally we do what you do at every Jewish event, either in the beginning, the middle, or at the end, or all three, and that is eat. So we will eat lots of good food after this. Okay, now it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Aram Harrow from Course 8. He's going to lead off for the Latke team. He's a brilliant scholar who's deeply knowledgeable in the field the rest of us know almost nothing about. So it's going to be easy to fool us. Aram is an assistant professor in the Center for Theoretical Physics here at MIT, where he teaches and does research on the theoretical aspects of quantum computing. Try that one. This means looking at the benefits of that quantum mechanics has to offer for how we communicate, store information, compute, or in this case, decide between delicious potato pancakes or nasty triangular blobs of dough. And some of his work even involves a lot of math, and some's a bit easier too. Professor Harrow began his debate preparation growing up in Michigan, where he was on the same high school team as 538's Nate Silver. Then he came here, attended for both undergrad and grad school, living first in AE Pi. Now I know we have a lot of AE Pi folks in this room, right? And then Bexley as a GRT. Do we have Bexley folks here? Okay. Bexley is no longer with us, as you know, but certainly AE Pi is, and will be for a long time. After grad school, Professor Harrow spent just enough time away from MIT that he would not be accused of overdoing it by returning to the faculty here. 5 years as a lecturer at the University of Bristol, and 2 years as a research professor at the University of Washington. Since 2013, he's been on the MIT faculty, where he's taught quantum mechanics, written a bunch of papers, supervised a few dissertations, organized some conferences, and extensively studied the relative virtues of the Latke and the Hamentasch, which brings him here tonight. Finally, I would add that Aram notes that a high point in his life was the moment the United Nations declared 2008 the International Year of the Potato, and named the potato a hidden treasure. I mean, this is actually, I looked it up, it's true. Like his beloved potato, Aram is a humble soul and a true hidden treasure. So let us welcome this humble quantum physicist, Aram.
Great, thanks for the wonderful introduction, and thanks to you for coming. Now, I have a talk here for you. On the desktop. Here we go. I'm a quantum computer scientist, not an existing computer scientist. So let me just say at the beginning, actually maybe I will wear this. Good, you hear? You hear this? I want to say at the beginning, I'm a scientist, I'm a physicist, I'm trying to give you a scientific argument for the Latke. You're going to hear pretty soon on the other side a lot of speculation, pseudoscience, trying to trick you into different things. So I'll just try and stay as close to the facts as I can and really just try to be rigorously scientific in what I tell you about. So let me first, I'll tell you a little bit about my research so you can see where I'm coming from. My field was founded by an idea of Richard Feynman, who observed that it was hard to simulate quantum mechanics. This is true on normal computers, and this suggests that quantum mechanics is doing something computationally beyond what our normal computers can do. And so Once you realize this, you might think, well, we should use something else. Instead of using an existing classical computer, we should build a quantum computer. And once you realize that quantum computers can do one thing beyond classical computers, like simulate quantum mechanics, you realize they can do a lot more. And since then, it's become a huge field. A lot of people trying to build quantum computers, people like me trying to figure out what we would do with them if we had them, which is a lot easier than trying to build them. But one embarrassing question that I get a lot, as soon as I explain to people what I do, is when are we going to have a quantum computer? It's everyone's favorite question. It's like, when are you going to graduate, et cetera. When are you going to get a job? Do you get the summers off, et cetera? And it's, I can never really give a very direct answer to it. The answer is, soon, not too far away, eventually. Not next year, obviously, but one of those pretty soon years. And okay, so why don't we have quantum computers yet? The problem is that quantum systems are very delicate. When you try and do anything with them, this is an actual plot taken off the internet. You try and manipulate quantum systems, they start oscillating in these beautiful ways, and then they decay. The fate of all quantum systems is to succumb to noise, to lose their quantum information. So what we need is a system that's naturally fault tolerant. Our existing computers have this fault tolerance. What we need is a quantum computing substrate that, instead of needing to be precisely manipulated, and all of our control knobs have to be turned just right, it should somehow have natural fault tolerance. It should, with only approximate control, its natural dynamics should steer it into the precise shape. And it's taken the community an embarrassingly long time to figure out that the answer is really right in front of us. The latke, obviously now, is something where you just pour the batter in, and it naturally forms a perfect circle. Unlike, I might add, the over-engineered monstrosity of the Hamentaschen, which you have to carefully fold. It usually falls apart. It never looks that good. And I think part of why quantum computing took so long is there were a lot of Hamentaschen engineers working on it, and they really steered us into a lot of wrong directions. But fortunately, thanks to embracing the principle of natural fault tolerance, things have been going a lot better for the field lately. That's not the only criteria. A big problem is temperature, right? So the quantum computing, we try to cool things down, but nevertheless, surviving thermal noise is a big problem. Again, the Latke wins, clearly. Being able to survive a hot environment, maintain this natural robustness in the presence of heat and noise is a huge advantage of the Latke over the Hamentaschen, which you bake it and then it crumbles. You take it out of the oven, you pick up one end, it falls to pieces on you. The Latke naturally maintains a shape that's fault tolerant in the presence of noise. Hamentaschen, not so much. It's not the only desiderata of a qubit. Obviously, at the end of your computation, what are you going to do with your computer? Not just throw it away. And of course, the Latke has an advantage here too. The Hamentaschen, I mean, you can try, right? You have to give them credit for trying. They're doing the best they can with the hand they've been dealt, but there's just not so much you can do with the Hamentaschen, I'm afraid. So anyway, that's my own field, quantum computing. I wanted to tell you specifically about my expertise here, but there's a lot of things we can learn from physics more generally. So let me talk about some of the broader goals of physics and what basically the big questions left over from the 20th century, which is how can we unite quantum mechanics and general relativity and gravity? These are sort of the great breakthroughs of the 20th century. We do not know how to combine them. And in the progress we've made so far in physics, there are kind of two main things that have carried us forward. One of them is the principle of symmetry, that if you look at the symmetries of a physical system, you can learn a lot. And in fact, this has been one of the main ways we've made progress. And the second one is a little bit more nebulous. It's the notion of you should have an aesthetic sense of a theory. You shouldn't do something that's overcomplicated, like the pre-Galilean notions of orbits, that if Occam's razor says that if it's simpler, it's more likely to be true. So these are some of the key principles, and let's see how they work in the context of the Latke and the Hamentaschen. So the symmetries, of course, I don't have enough time to go into all of them. One of the main symmetries of Latke is, of course, the circular symmetry. You can rotate it this way and it's symmetric. What has this given us in physics? Among many other things, this describes the spirals of the recently discovered gravitational waves, which I think we can all agree are one of the great breakthroughs, not only of physics, but really of humanity overall. Something we can be proud of. Thank you, Barry. Thank you. This is, right, and this is not even the only symmetry of the Latke. I don't have enough time to get into it, but even the reflection symmetry of the Latke relates to things like the matter-antimatter symmetry, things which are, have been enormous, sources of enormous progress in physics and knowledge overall. What about the Hamentaschen? Of course, that has its own triangular symmetry. What have we gotten from triangular symmetry in history? Nothing good. The only triangular symmetry I've seen is the triangular trade, which is one of the lowest moments of human history. And these people are going to try and sell it to you. So be careful with what they say. They're really going to twist things. It's the only way they can prevail. And finally, let me just close with the matter of taste. You know, that's ultimately should be the arbiter of a good physical theory or a good snack. And here you have the delightful, fried, crisp, good, complemented with sour cream or applesauce, versus this, which, since this is a family debate, I will not even describe, but is just gruesome looking. I think with this, I'll rest my case. Thank you very much.
Aram, thank you. Now, next up is Ina Lipkowitz, leading off for the Latke-Hamentashen team. She's a scholar who actually researches and lectures about food. Really? How about them apples, Latke people? Yeah. Ina has graced the MIT community for more than 10 years as a lecturer in MIT's literature department. She devotes her talent to stretching the minds of fabulous long charges like her in this room, introducing them to varieties of literary texts, and especially to the Bible, both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. Her research brings together her extensive background in comparative literature and biblical studies with her deep interest in culinary history. Hailed by the Wall Street Journal as, quote, equal parts scholar and foodie, she is the author of the culinary history, Words to Eat By, a book on the stories of the oldest English food names we have, which also happen to be the foods mentioned most often in the Bible. Imagine that, the whole book on matzah. She is also involved in interfaith education and works with temples, churches, and mosques, introducing Jews, Christians, and Muslims to each other's faiths and foods. In addition to classes on short fiction and the English novel, she regularly teaches classes on the Bible, including upper-level seminars like 21L.932, Biblical Hermeneutics and the Hamentaschen, or 21L.1045, Leviticus and the Latke. Finally, she has also developed a course in the history of cookbooks. This is for real, in which students trace the Latke back to its earliest known recipe in the privately circulated domestic manual of one Mrs. Judah Maccabee. Recent articles include the sweet tooth and the eclipse of the raised dough Hamentaschen, and a great miracle happened here: genetically modified potato latkes. Ina, thank you.
How do I get rid of your PowerPoint?
Do you want this guy?
No, I'm just going to stand here.
So you go.
Okay, up here. Here we go. Hello. I have to say that as I prepared for this, I hadn't known about this debate, and as I prepared, I reviewed some arguments over the years. And I have to say that MIT has a collection of physicists, chemists, mathematicians, engineers of all varieties, and I've never heard so much fiction in my whole life. Whereas here I, the teacher of fiction, I'm going to give you the truth. The truth. The whole truth, nothing but the truth. And I have two things to say. One, truth is stranger than fiction. And two, is not pretty. The story of the Latke will be a tale of, I'm going to read the rap sheet here, forced conversion international theft, lust, rape, murder, decapitation, not to mention colonialism, ethnic warfare, and cultural appropriation of the most heinous variety. It is no exaggeration to say that the Latke is the epitome of evil today. It is a lie. It has nothing to do with the events it purports to commemorate. The Hamentashen, on the other hand, well, it's a symbol, as we will see, of diversity, global inclusivity, and gender equality. We all know that the holiday of Hanukkah celebrates the rededication of the temple in 2nd century BCE Jerusalem after it had been desecrated by the Assyrian Greeks. A small band of soldiers led by the mighty Maccabees, Judah Maccabee at the head, resisted assimilation, which we would call forced conversion, and fought to recapture the temple, in which they were successful. They were rewarded, as the story tells us, with a small bed of oil that lasted for 8 days. And on the basis of that, today we cook with oil and eat the latke. But why the latke? Why? The oil is fine. Why the latke? Because, according to none other than Jenny Grossinger, not exactly a biblical historian, but the owner of Grossinger's Catskill Resort Hotel, and author of that wonderful 1950s Art of Jewish Cooking, in her words, the recipe she served at her Borscht Belt Hotel was the exact one, and I quote, which the wives of the soldiers of the ancient hero Judah Maccabee hurriedly cooked for their men behind the lines as they united to drive the Syrians out of their land. And that's why today we eat the latke. Well, we have a problem because no Maccabee could have eaten a potato latke. No Maccabee could have known what a potato was, because potatoes are indigenous to the Andes, clear the other side of the globe, and they didn't even make it to Europe for about 2,000 years. So, like, we got a problem with Jenny Grossinger. When you look at the etymology of the latke itself, it has nothing to do with potatoes. Sorry, guys, not a thing to do with the potato. It traces back, as you can see, the Yiddish word latke from the Russian oladya, going back to the Middle Greek. To the Greek, it basically means a little oily thing. And that's what you're defending, a little oily thing. So why the potato? Well, here's the real reason. They're cheap. They're cheap, which is a really interesting fact when you think that time was that they were more valuable than gold. When Francisco Pizarro and his conquistadores traveled over to the New World, they wiped out that Incan Empire in the 16th century. It wasn't for the gold and other precious metals that they heard of. It was for the potatoes that they found when they got there. Which means, think about it, that today, when we eat potato latkes to commemorate the victory, we're glorifying the food that the conquistadores stole from the Incans, whose civilization they destroyed. By analogy, we're on the side of the Assyrians, who tried to do the same to the Jews. There he is, politely receiving that potato. And here, all those centuries later, is what happens if you eat latkes. You might know Vincent van Gogh's The Potato Eaters. Well, what you don't know is the original title was The Latke Eaters, in order to show how guilty and miserable latke eating will make you. Which is why in this day and age of political correctness, uber political correctness, it is incumbent upon us to boycott the latke. So you might ask, what about latkes without potatoes? I understand today there are lots of cookbooks you can make with zucchini and sweet potato and carrots and everything else. No better. There are 2 stories in the Bible, and I know this, I teach it. There are 2 stories in the Bible about pancakes, and they're both horrible. They're both about lust, sex, death, and murder. The first one, I kid you not, in the book of 2 Samuel, David's son and heir falls in lust with his beautiful half-sister. He takes to his bed. She misinterprets the sign. She thinks he's hungry. She makes him pancakes, feeds them to him. He regains his strength, and that's what happens. He rapes her, loses his life, loses the throne. The united monarchy falls apart. Here we have 17th century painting of the latke eater unleashed. I kid you not. Second story adds murder and decapitation to the charges of the Latke. The book of Judith. Finally, we get a feminist hero in the Bible. Book of Judith, very young, very beautiful, lures the Assyrian general into her tent. In the Bible's own words, his passion was aroused, for he had been waiting for an opportunity to seduce her from the day he first saw her. He was greatly pleased and drank a great quantity of wine. Well, you know what happens when you drink a lot of wine? You pass out, which is what he did. And she seized her opportunity, took her sword, and hacked off his head. And why was he so thirsty? Because she cleverly fed him salty cheese pancakes ahead of time. So what do these biblical pancake stories teach us? Avoid pancakes. It seems pretty clear. So that said, I've got a revolutionary idea. In the interest of keeping things kosher, plenty of bakers use oil instead of butter. In fact, according to, Procter & Gamble. This is again a quote, "The Hebrew race has been waiting for 4,000 years for Crisco, which is, after all, just a solid form of vegetable oil. So why not make your life a whole lot easier, keep your kitchen a whole lot cleaner, and skip the frying altogether? You can use oil, which is, after all, the point of Hanukkah. If you make a dough with Crisco, roll it out, you can stand up, cut it into whatever shape you want, and fill it with cheese in memory of Judith, our feminine equivalent of Judah. You will thus have squared the circle, or triangulated it, redeemed your morality by foregoing the potato, challenged the sexism of biblical history, and invented a new delicacy to boot, the cheese Hamentaschen. I was going to call that the Latke-Hamentashen, but I thought that might make voting a little bit, difficult. So I leave you with a thought. The book of Deuteronomy tells us that when the Israelite people were at the foot of Sinai, having just received the covenant, God gave them a choice. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and destruction. Choose life. Very famous passage, and very inaccurately translated. You might know that in the 1940s, those archaeologists discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, and for the first time in history, they had the true words that God gave to Moses to give to his people. And those true words were, see, I have set before you today life and the Hamentaschen, death and the Latke. Choose the Hamentaschen.
All right. Next up for Team Latke, if they can survive that onslaught, is Chris Capizzola, an associate professor of history here at MIT, is up next. And as noted in the introduction, the early introduction, culture and history play crucial roles in the central question before this body tonight. And those happen to be Professor Capizzola's specialty, especially when it comes to American history, even our own. Chris has written and taught extensively on immigration and the political and cultural history of the United States from the late 19th century to the present. It is no accident the beginning of that period coincides with the first great waves of Eastern European migration, Jewish migrations, which made the Lower East Side the most popular and populous place on earth for a while, the densest. And this density naturally provided many opportunities to feed hungry new Americans, leading to the refinement of the two delicacies we're discussing tonight. In fact, and this is true, Chris has owned his class on immigration history. He takes them down to the Lower East Side and has them eat the food, sample the foods. He encourages them to eat latkes, and when they're doing Hamentaschen, he looks the other way. Before coming to MIT, Professor Capizzola received a BA from a modest liberal arts college somewhere else in Cambridge, and then went on to a PhD in history at Columbia. Since coming here to MIT, he was honored with the prestigious Levitan Teaching Award. This award recognizes excellence in teaching generally, and all nominations come from students, like here. So it's really an honor. But students can be swayed by latkes, as you know. So next year, he gets to serve as Secretary of the Faculty. So let's give a great big welcome to our humble, Latke-loving historian.
All right, so thank you all for coming, and thank you for my fellow presenters, and thank you for that rousing last bit of commentary from the other side. I have really just one thing to say. And I come to you tonight with my friend, the humble potato, right, that I would like to draw your attention to. We gather in a time of great division, in which the boundaries of nation, ethnicity, and religion threaten to tear our common human fabric into shreds. And so I ask you, good people, to search out what we have in common, what unites us rather than what divides us, the shared heritage of humanity that may span the borders of state and faith. I submit to you that what may unite us to come together tonight as the people of the potato. For the potato is a food that unites, not divides. It is a food that joins continents, indeed, as you have heard. It was, in fact, actually, as you heard earlier, cultivated in the Andes some 8,000 years ago, and it was, like corn, tomatoes, and syphilis, one of the New Word entities imported back to Europe as part of the Columbian exchange that followed 1492. It is a uniting food. It is also a food that works. For the next 5 centuries, this humble entity kept Europe's poorest people alive. Potatoes grow easily, even in small patches of the worst possible soil. So if you don't own land, or don't own much land, you can still raise potatoes. They require little tending. So if you work for someone else and have very little time to plant or cultivate, you can still raise some potatoes. They are a very efficient food. As the UN reported in that miraculous year of the potato in 2008, up to 85% of the plant is edible. They need almost no technology to make them so. And especially when mixed with a little bit of dairy, some sour cream, for example, they provide reasonable amounts of nutrition with protein, vitamin C, and potassium. Now, in that sense, the potato is a unifying food that brings us together across these boundaries for the people of the potato. Right? They are not solely a Jewish food. Right? They are, in fact, among those taken up by my own ancestors, the Irish, despite my last name. That is primarily my background. And by 1800, the potato dominated the diet of nearly 90% of the Irish population. Many Irish ate nothing else. One study from the 19th century documented that hardworking Irish laborers regularly consumed 21 pounds of potatoes per day. Right? Now that is carbo-loading at its best. No little oily thing, as you have heard spoken before. Well, no wonder then that literary greats have turned to the humble potato and made it the subject of poetic rhapsody. The web abounds with poems devoted to potatoes. I could find no compelling poems about prunes other than on sites devoted to digestion, and none devoted to the poppy seed beyond that of heroin. We might turn, for example, to the works of the Polish poet Aram Harrow in his poem Kartofla. Right? The potato, down deep in the ground, lies still. In great mother's bosom, all needed warmth feels, and fruit of thousands giving its growth, thus will all hungered plowmen preserve from fast. Or to the Yiddish language poet F.B. Ravitsky in his poem Der Marantz und die Kartoffel, which is a dialogue between an orange and a potato. An orange said to the potato, "You are dirty, and you are low. Poor people eat you. I am beautiful, sparkling, clean." Now the potato answered, "Actually, the truth is, I feed the hungry and the satisfied." Now, these great tales of poetry, these great tales of history, these great sort of rhapsodies of the potato were some of the unspoken stories in my own childhood home, where my Irish grandmother and Irish American mother prepared one of our favorite foods that we called potato pancakes. Now, was this some ancient Irish recipe handed down through the generations? Of course not. Potatoes came late to Ireland and at the imposition of the English. Was this some ancient recipe handed down from Sinai or Mesopotamia? Of course not. They came initially from the New World. They were creations, improvisations, borrowings, and remakings, perhaps done in moments of hunger, perhaps in moments when my Irish grandmother borrowed from her Jewish neighbors in the Bronx. Who knows and who cares? The shared history is precisely the point and the most precious possession. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, join me and this humble potato and this more attractive potato behind me, and join together as the people of the potato, and I will provide you one final poem in rhapsody of this great tuber in the words of an unnamed Irish bard who wrote the following. We praise all the flowers that we fancy, sip the nectar of the fruit ere they're peeled, ignoring the common old tater, when in fact he's the king of the field. Let us show the old boy we esteem him, sort of dig him up out of the mud. Let us show him he shares our affections and crown him with glory, King Spud. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next up for the team Hamentashen is David Vogan, who is the Norbert Wiener Professor of Mathematics at MIT. This is a very prestigious chair. Norbert Wiener was an absolutely towering intellect in his time here at MIT back in the mid-20th century. Professor Vogan came here to the Institute after he received his bachelor and master's degree in mathematics from the University of Chicago, aforementioned. This is the starter of this tradition. Happily, he then earned his PhD here and stayed at MIT ever since. He's never left, and even headed the mathematics department for a number of years. David is now teaching courses in group theory, which sounds like something in the social sciences, but is not. He also teaches probability and statistics, which is one of those things that is nearly certain to happen if you wait long enough. He recently retired from the position as president of the American Mathematical Society, which he says is just about as powerful a position as you'd think. He can explain. This last bit of information caused me to go to the web to check this out. And I went to his webpage and I found out he actually has a certified nerd score, which I didn't know such a thing existed, but it measures personal things like how much RAM you have on your computer, or you know, whether you can solve differential equations. So anyway, he had a score of 92. So being naturally competitive, I tried taking it myself. And like many in this room, I had a respectable score, quite respectable, far above the national average, but far below Professor Vogan's. I mean, this man is up there. He has set the bar very high. So I challenge all of you to try your nerd score and see if you can beat 92. Professor Vogan admits to eating latkes, and for decades, because his wife is very good at making them. But he's eager for new experiences. That's why he's here tonight. And the Hamentaschen appear to be just about his speed. So please welcome Professor Vogan and his deep insight and growing insight into these tasty pastries.
Thank you very much. While I get my PDF up here, I'll tell you, oops, that wasn't the right command. Is there a rotate? So one, okay, but.
You want like full screen?
Sure.
View?
Slideshow, perfect.
And then
okay.
You pause it. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So perfect. So I was going to tell you one thing about the esteemed Professor Wiener and food. One of my favorite stories about Professor Wiener concerned his meeting okay, thank you. Concerned his meeting someone on the giant staircase at the entrance to Building 2, halfway up the stairs, and he paused to have a long conversation with them, and at the end of the conversation he said, by the way, when we met, was I going up the stairs or coming down the stairs? And his friend said, well, you were going up the stairs. Oh, good, he said, then I've had lunch. So I want to tell you, we've seen these various partisan pictures of what Latke and Hamentashen are. I, as a mathematician, like to tell you exactly what the words mean. So I have a diagram here of a Latke. Actually, Aram showed pretty much the same picture in one of his first slides, that what we saw, the decayed qubit, the little qubit running off to the wild, becoming useless and nothing. That's basically a Latke.
The microphone's not on.
Ah, okay. Okay, thank you. On the other hand, the Hamentasch is here. It's a beautiful thing. So a Latke is a set. And sets were important things in the history of mathematics, as leeches were in the history of medicine. And you know, we study them in mathematics. A Hamentasch, however, is a simplex. Simplices are a sophisticated modern tool, like Prozac or something like that. So I want to tell you how these things appear in mathematics. So there's a little bit of stuff that you study in mathematics, the shorter catechism. And the first question in the shorter catechism is, what is the chief end of humankind? And the answer to this question that you study, the chief end of humankind is algebraic topology. The second, well, on this question, all mathematicians agree. And the second question in the catechism, what rule have we been given to direct us how we may do algebraic topology? Well, this is where schism begins. So there are two schools of thought. There's the school of thought with check cohomology. The way you do algebraic topology is you try to cover a space with Latkes. The other school of thought is simplicial cohomology. In simplicial cohomology, you cover the space with Hamentaschen. This is a thing of beauty. So, well, I do want to be open-minded. I'm going to tell you what's good about Latke cohomology. So sometimes you have to use Latke cohomology if you're on some Grothendieck topos or something, but that's kind of specialized. Oh yeah, when you explain these things, it's really easy at the blackboard. So that's a good thing. Well, anyway, it's easier to talk about Hamentasch cohomology. So let me tell you a little bit about what's wonderful about Hamentasch cohomology. So the first thing is that you can cover anything with Hamentaschen. So for a mathematician, this picture of a sphere covered with Hamentaschen is really enough. These kind of applied people may be interested in other things, but you can cover other stuff too. This is for my daughter, the bunny rabbits. So And furthermore, there's only one way to cover things with Hamentashen up to chip chopping. That's the Hauptvermutung. And so this is clearly a glorious version of mathematics. So here's what I have to summarize, that even though they are triangular, Hamentaschen make the world go round. You see, we can be poetic. So, well, the slide asks, what have we learned? So in preparing these slides, I learned a lot. So how to spell this funny German word, whatever it is. I learned how to use the footnote command. Well, my 420 seconds are up. Thank you for listening. Special thanks to Al Gore. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Now, finishing up for Team Latke is Stephen Van Evera, Professor Stephen Van Evera of Course 17. He's Ford International Professor in the MIT Political Science Department, for those that don't know what Course 17 is. Since 1990, he's been wandering around the Institute discussing mundane issues like national security, the causes of war, and why it doesn't make sense for the U.S. to invade Liechtenstein, occupy Tonga, or impose sanctions on Paraguay. He's even written several books on these subjects and on social science methods as well. He overcame an early academic miscue, earning a bachelor's degree in government at Harvard by taking Horace Greeley's advice to go west, young man, go west. So he went out to Cal Berkeley to earn both a master's and a PhD in political science before coming back here. Now he's married and lives in Lexington with his wife Beth and daughters Lydia, Eleanor, and Alice. Are any of them, are they here? They're here, great. Who love him very much. But a few days ago, they actually wrote me to say that they generally think his attempts at humor are quite pathetic and fear that we organizers of this debate have blundered by inviting him to participate. Well, when I relayed this concern to Stephen, he responded with puzzlement about his family's inability to recognize his truly epic genius for comic performance. So, thank you. Very much in tune with his own discipline and current news, Professor Van Evera's presentation tonight has a political campaign theme. So let's hear from Professor Van Evera. Thank you.
How do I get it going here? Oh, there it is. Yeah, there we go. And we control it this way. Okay. So I'm from the political science department. One of our bailiwicks is to cover political campaigns and the way they're waged, and we also cover political communication and how it's done and how candidates frame their messages and communicate their messages. So that's point one about why I'm going to frame things the way I do tonight. Second, we have an election campaign going on this year, so campaigning is in the air. It's in the zeitgeist. You're all being treated, even as I speak, to the wonders and marvels and beauties of American public political campaigning. And so I'm going to make the case for Locke as sort of drawing on the communication science that underpins the way that modern U.S. political campaigns are waged. And I want to warn you all, though, if there are any idealists or people with delicate sensibilities in the audience, you might want to hide your eyes and cover your ears, because the science on which I'm going to draw tonight is a dark science. It appeals to our darker side, to our demons. It uses slander and lies and false patriotism and character assassination and all those good things that you see whenever you click on the news to see what's happening out there in the current campaign. Candidates use these techniques for a good reason, however. The voters eat them up, like latkes. Remember that about latkes. I think we'll clip over. We're going to click past this. This is too terrible to even tell you about the way that people used to do campaigns. It's awful. Okay. Keys to success. in modern American political campaigns, a few words of preface about the underlying ideas here. How do you win a campaign? Well, you wrap yourself in patriotic symbols. We all know what they are: the flag, the Declaration of Independence, great presidents. You wrap yourself in the aura of national security. Hey, we're going to secure this country, okay? We're doing in those terrorists. We got them, okay? And you associate your opponent with weakness on terrorism, weakness in general, disloyalty, defeatism, surrender, wimpitude, snivelity. Does anyone know what snivelity is? That's the propensity of someone to snivel, okay? And you accuse people of, you know, snivelity. And you associate them with bad stuff. Kim Kardashian, everyone's sick of Kim Kardashian. You associate them with Kim Kardashian, whoever is, you know, not in fashion these days. Zika virus, associate them with that. Just associate them. Is it honest? Is it fair? No. This is campaign. This is politics, okay? It's rough and tumble, okay? You associate them with scary-seeming minorities like thespians. Accuse them of being thespians. And, you know, let somebody look it up after the meeting, and, you know, then they can figure it out later, clean up the mess. Assassinate their character. Accuse them of bad stuff and let them try to wipe off the mud. Accuse them of masticating, lucubrating. Anyone know what lucubrating is? Go look it up. It's awful. Perambulating with children. Associating with sexagenarians. Co-cerebrating, you name it, okay? Just make the charge and let others clean it off. That slide I went past with Lyndon Johnson, I probably should have dwelled on it. Johnson famously once accused one of his opponents of having sex with barnyard animals. And his aide said to him, you know, Mr. Johnson, you can't say that, that's not true. And Johnson said, I know it's not true, I just want to make him deny it. Because, well, whatever, this is true. Johnson was one of the masters. Of course, you don't want to talk about serious policy problems. The basic idea here is you want to appeal to that reptilian core that underlies the thin veneer of reason which we all pretend to follow and obey. So in that spirit, going to make a few points here about latkes and Hamentaschen. Patriotic symbols and how to use them here. Okay, latkes. They're America's food. We're gonna make you believe that real fast here, okay? Latkes are made from potatoes. True fact. Potatoes, as we learned, are from Peru, which is a bit of a problem, a wrinkle, you know, a little obstacle in the road to this attaching of latkes to good old USA. So how do you work with that? You got some thin material, but you work with it. So you take that south word, okay, and you just kind of airbrush it out of the picture. You just kind of airbrush it out. And then you got your association, you got your symbolism, okay? It's America's food. It's America's food. Be against latkes, be against America. These people, there's a problem with their love of country, I think. For shame. You get to the for shame line. And then you got to use some visuals. Because everyone says, it's an axiom in politics that it's the visuals that matter. You can say anything, people can criticize you, but if the visuals are good, you go with it. And so you got to meld these symbols together. You got some Old Glory and some latkes next to it, and then you use. I mean, why do we have a limited imagination about these stars up there? What are they doing? I'm sorry, they're not stars. It's latkes. Okay, so everybody, you're fired up? Come on, do it. Latkes, okay? USA, USA, latkes, latkes, USA, USA, USA. You gotta be mob-like. Latkes, USA, okay? There's gotta be a sort of mob-like, threatening quality to the way you express yourself at that point. All right, so now, time comes in every campaign when you've got to speak those tough truths that everybody is thinking, the elephants in the room, and you can just see the story here, and I'm sorry, but we just have to raise this issue. I mean, what is this business of, you know, the triangle and Benedict Arnold? Benedict Arnold. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I think we said enough. On the other hand, latkes, okay? We live in a dangerous world. We've got people out there that want to kill us. ISIS, all the rest. You want national security, you want strength, go with latkes. Hot oil. look at this, okay? This is how we deal with problems. If you look carefully there, I don't have a pointer, but up there in the middle of that parapet, you got that little pot, okay? That's a pot of oil. And those are patriotic Americans there, you know, brave men and women in uniform who are defending the parapets from the ISIS guys down below. You see them? They're coming, okay? They're coming to get us. And you see that battering ram they got, okay? And those brave Americans on the parapet have just finished a great meal of latkes, and they're about to pour that oil right down on those guys. They're going to fry them, okay? Latkes, national security. Don't ever think anything other than that. We're going to save the country. Hamentasch, what good are they? What good are they in combat? We need a food that's good in combat. Okay, that's what we need here. These are dangerous times. Dangerous times. What are you going to do for saving your country? What are you going to do to protect us? I haven't heard a single word makes me believe that Hamentaschen is useful in any way for securing our country from the threats we face. Yeah. Gooey, yeah, they're gooey. What can you do with something gooey? You can't kill anybody with a gooey prune, okay? Or a gooey apricot, or a ground up poppy seed, or a flaky crust. A flaky crust, no good in combat, I'm sorry. You guys are gooey food eating surrender monkeys, that's what you are. You got to get the, you know, don't be afraid to be ad hominem in a campaign. You got to just be ad hominem, just say it. These people, I think they're defeatist. That's all I can say. Quagmires, we had bad experiences with them. Quagmires are gooey. Vietnam was gooey. Iraq was gooey. Prunes are gooey. What can I say? These people, I think they have no faith in our men and women in uniform. I just think they don't. Then you got the fact that some of our greatest leaders have loved latkes. Take one of the greatest presidents ever, William Howard Taft. He was great. Smiling, jolly dude who kept us out of war. And why was he so jolly? Latkes. He was engorged with latkes. Check that roly-poly tummy and that nice smile. What can I say? You know, he's the best endorsement for latkes we've ever seen, I think. Now, of course, I'm stretching things a little bit. I don't think Taft ever ate a latke in his life. He was a guy who probably ate crumpets all the time. So what's my evidence, okay? But this is politics. You don't need evidence. Evidence is just a little obstacle on the way to victory. And you just step over it, okay? So, you know, Barack Obama was born in Kenya. We've heard about that. And, you know, the Muslims were all cheering for the fall of the Twin Towers in 9/11. And you just say that stuff, and then you move on. It's kind of the way you do a campaign. Just say it, and then just move on. It's not a problem that, you know, you're being a bit fictional. So, you know, we just go with the story. It's a good one. Taft is happy. He's got the smile. You just roll with it. You roll with it. On the other hand, Hamentaschen, I'm sorry, again, we have to say what's got to be said. Good heavens, these people are naming their food after a mass murderer. We don't need to talk anymore about it. And what are the poppy seeds? I haven't even gotten to this, okay? We know what a problem we've had with drugs, and all I can say is they are not helping. You are not helping. Quit calling it Hamentaschen, start calling it Freedomtaschen, or we're going to know where you stand. So otherwise, like, you know, you can read here. Gooey, food-eating surrender monkeys. That's what we're dealing with on the other side. I'm sorry. So NATO alliance, they want to ruin that. You know, Napoleon burned down Europe. He had a triangular hat. These people have a loyalty problem. But the implication of all this, I think, is vote early and often for latkes. USA. Latkes, latkes, USA. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you, Stephen. And now for our concluding speaker, Kim Kimmerling from Course 3. Kim is the Thomas Lord Professor of Material Science and Engineering at MIT. His spectacular bio, and it is spectacular, reads like that of a typical MIT faculty overachiever. He has authored more than 350 technical papers and holds more than 75 patents. He has served as director of MIT's Material Processing Center for 15 years, 15 long and healthy, good years. He was also the founding director of the MIT Microphotonics Center, which researches the design and processing of semiconductor materials and devices. I think that's the really small stuff that goes in our cell phones. Is that right? and he's really quite a fellow. In fact, he is a fellow of the American Physical Society, a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and a fellow of the Minerals, Metals, and Materials Society, just to name a couple of things he's a fellow of. Perhaps of even greater relevance to today's subject, his family includes some serious foodies. After growing up in Alabama in a large multi-generational family that shared a great Southern cooking tradition at a large common dinner table, he married into a family of gourmet cooks. His son, as a former chef and caterer, now teaches culinary arts. His daughter, a noted behavioral psychologist, is the creator of ice cream therapy. That's a therapy I'd like. Thank you. Though he modestly claims to have retained a few useful skills from his family's outstanding culinary and eating expertise, Professor Kimmerling has used his knowledge of material science to develop a remarkable insight into the substances that comprise the Hamentaschen. So let's hear from Kim.
I'm here. Can you hear? Good. Okay. So, it's always good to have a physicist around, right? So, my colleagues on the Hamentaschen side would like to thank our esteemed colleagues on the Latke side for giving such a brilliant introduction to the points that will follow. It's simply a matter of the fact that the Hamentaschen rises to a higher calling. So we're going to introduce a few concepts based on fundamental material science, and we'll end up with a few concepts that will simply refute what you've heard earlier. So as a material scientist, you look at the world. In the beginning, everything was energy, and then all of that energy began to coalesce into fundamental particles and into substances, and then in the end, it will all end up into a big glob of entropy. We'll just mix together, and there'll be no distinguishing features of anything. So the material scientist has as its goal to build new materials that build structure and prevent this reduction to simply entropy. So let's talk about the point that we heard earlier about symmetry. So if you think about the Hamentaschen, it is almost perfect symmetry. It's a very simple folding routine. Folding is very important in the way that we were all created. It ends up with this very perfect equilateral triangle. Now, I've thought about some different folding options that we may have encountered in life. One of the most difficult ones is located here, where if you ever try to take a tefillin that's right-handed and change it to left-handed, you have to undo all of the knots and then put them back together again in a very prescribed way. Impossible task to do. I tried it once, and it's still lying around on the floor. This is the simplest challah that you can make. Only 3 strands. It's impossible to make a challah with 3. The 4-stranded challah is even more difficult, and you always run out of folding on the way there. And then look over here. If anybody asked you to make 2 potato latkes the same, what would be the probability that that could happen? 0. So Hamentaschen has only one configuration of the triangle, and the equilateral triangle can fill all space, as we heard from our mathematician. So we're starting out pretty good as far as raising ourselves above the end of the entropic catastrophe. Latkes have no symmetry. It's a high entropy material because you can't place those little strands of potatoes on top of each other the same way any different time. So we normally think of entropy as a number of ways you can put things together. So Latke is just a confused material. That's the way we would judge it from material science. Now, what about tikkun olam? Why is that important to this argument? One thing is it raises us a slight level above what we just heard in the previous talk. So people think of tikkun olam as healing the world, which implies there's something wrong with it. The more optimistic view might be Heschel, who says we're just completing the act of creation. So we're building materials that are making a better world. So which is better, a Latke or a Hamentashen? So there are ways a material scientist can actually judge which is better, a Latke or a Hamentashen. And thermodynamics is the basis of that. It's a way that you take all the system mechanics of putting the atoms together to create a material, and you decide whether its energy is higher or lower. So if the energy goes up, which in Latke connotation we call energy aliyah, that you're moving it up. So the question is, which has more aliyah, the Hamentashen or the Latke? So we have this equation. In secular terms, it's called Gibbs free energy. In Hamentashen terms, it's called goodness. So goodness is the Hamentashen factor minus the temperature of preparation of whatever the substance is times the complexity. So let's see how these measure up. H is a measure of how many chemical bonds are formed. So Hamentashen dough undergoes this great phase transition when you take all of the dough and you put it together and it bakes, and you end up with this delicious cookie pastry. So we'll give it 4 pluses for that phase transition. Latkes, it's a mixture when you start, and it's a mixture when you're finished. So we'll give them 1 plus. What about complexity? Well, Hamentashen are comprised of 2 distinct phases. They're arranged in a fixed symmetry, and they have a sharp interface between the filling and the enclosure for the filling. So as far as the number of ways we can make that, it's only 1 plus. There's very few ways that you can arrange a Hamentashen. But a potato latke, we know there's no way to make 2 the same, so there's an infinite number of ways to make a potato latke. And the temperature of cooking is the same for each. Around 350, we have to go to degrees Kelvin to do the calculation. Okay. So here it is. So the goodness factor for Hamentashen, 4 pluses minus 450 times a single plus for the entropy. And for the potato latke, 1 plus minus 450 times 4 pluses. So if you subtract one from the other, you find out that the Hamentashen's goodness is 3 pluses plus 450 times 3 pluses. So much, much better than the Latke. So Hamentashen are higher on the goodness factor, and they fulfill the mitzvah tikkun olam because we're making the world better in making a Hamentashen. Now, my graduate student, Brian Albert, is sitting there. And I asked him to, in order to get his degree, to do one more experiment. He defended his thesis last week, so he was obviously successful. And that experiment was to see whether you could, if Hamentashen were a natural phenomenon, they should be able to be self-assembled. So he did an experiment in the laboratory to see whether we could self-assemble Hamentashen. And he used a model material, germanium and silicon dioxide. And here you can see the emerging Hamentashen on the left. And you can see the, I think this is a raspberry filling that is self-assembling on the outside. And according to Brian, he had to terminate this experiment early in order to get this picture. But if it kept going, this filling would go inside this Hamentashen, and you would end up with a self-assembled Hamentashen, just by putting those ingredients together separately in the beginning. Okay, so now we have, as we do in, we'll give you a nano quiz. Why is my department, material science, Quartz 3? I'll give you a hint. Okay. Getting closer? because 3 inspires Hamentaschen, and Hamentaschen inspire building a better world. Right? Okay, so if you want to be in course 3, the first thing you have to do is our laboratory, which is to make this little tikkun olam pendant, and I'm going to give you the recipe for that laboratory. So first you take the filling out of the Hamentaschen, and you go sit down on a chair, put some ice cream with it in a bowl, and you enjoy yourself for a while. Then you take the remaining 2 shells of the Hamentaschen, you moisten them, and you rotate one of them 180 degrees to the other. We're doing over here. You place it between 2 fry pans and apply pressure. Now there's one caveat: if the fry pans were used previously to make latkes, you have to bury them in the ground for 8 days before you can use it for this laboratory. Then you bake at 350, and then tikkun olam will arise on the surface, and you'll have your pendant. So do the experiment, and I'll welcome you to course 3. One last thing, for the non-thinker, we often think that the free market will evaluate everything, so we just follow the free market. You don't have to go through any of this thermodynamics or anything else. And when we did a free market evaluation, we found out that Hamentaschen 3.17 times more valuable in the free market than latkes. So you want the data? You're MIT. Here's the latkes at Trader Joe's. $3.76 per pound. $3.78. I'll even give you 2 more cents. $3.78 per pound. Here's Hamentaschen at Whole Foods, $11.99 a pound. So, free market evaluation, it's all Hamentaschen. And lastly, when I started this research in order to give this talk, my family of foodies said, "You're going up against Haman, one of the great evildoers of all time, and you're going up against fried fat. Nobody will say anything against fried fat. It's the most popular food in the world. So what can you do in a redeeming feature?" So I went with the tikkun olam to begin with, but actually that's not the only way one can go. This hat is the American Revolution. What could be greater than this hat? Thank you.
Thanks to everybody. Thank you all, and to this wonderful group of presenters. Thank you so much. Now what we do is we give them a little break time to figure out their rebuttals. Get a couple of minutes, and then we'll reconvene, and you'll get 1 minute for each rebuttal. Fair enough? So take a short break. Yep.
Well, we'll make some announcements during the short break. The most important, I'm sure everyone wants to know how the food is going to work after this debate concludes, so I will explain quickly that, you guys should continue working on your debate. So when you walk outside, there are tables, they have drinks on the center, then there are Hamentaschen, then there are latkes on the end, there are plates and everything available. There are gluten-free latkes on the left. They're in a small container. If you're not gluten-free, save those until the very end, just in case we have some gluten-free folks. Someone asked before, neither the Hamentaschen or the latkes are vegan. They both have eggs in them. I apologize if you are vegan. 2 other quick announcements. Also, when you go outside, there is a large photo stand and banner, and our photographer, Jonathan, is going to be taking photos out there of you, and we will post them on Facebook later. So if you would like that, then you should take a photo. Also, I'm happy to take one with your cell phone if you would like that as well. And then there are 2 other, there's a table outside for Birthright Israel. If you are interested and eligible, you can go talk to Shoshana and Ilan. If you are not interested, they will not hate you, I promise. Just tell them, they'll leave you alone. And then this is our box, this is our tzedakah box for Relay for Life donations. MIT Hillel is having a team this year, and so if you would like to make a donation, we would be happy to pass that on to the Relay for Life and the American Cancer Association. So after the rebuttals, we will have one more quick set of announcements, which include also the winners of the raffle. So I hope you kept your little red tickets, and that if your friends left, that they left you their tickets also.
Is that before or after the voting?
That will be after the voting, so stay in your seats momentarily after we vote. Back to Bob.
Do we have a speaker? Okay, Latke started, so the Hamentaschen can go first. 1 minute.
Okay, we're going to build a wall around the misstatements that these Latke people have made, and we're going to make them pay for it. To cite just one of the egregious falsehoods, there's a well-known poem by Keats, the Ode to the Nightingale, which sings of poppy seeds. Well, how you could not have found it. I'm sure you found it. You just ignored it. We heard from the Latkes about vanishing cubits, about dead potatoes, about demons. We heard from the Hamentaschen about symmetry, about sugar, and about sustainability. I think that this is not a complicated question. Thank you.
So, I have not so much to rebut because of how much time they spent making our points. We heard that the latke used to be cheese, but evolved with cultural exchange to now be made out of potato. In this way, the latke, I would say, is the true 21st century multicultural food, while the Hamentaschen continues to fade justly into obscurity. We heard that mathematically the simplex is used for some cohomology, but let me remind you of one of the greatest mathematical insights of all time, which was that we used to think of numbers as positive integers, 1, 2, 3, 4. It took a long time before we realized that 0 was a number. This insight, obviously, is in the shape of the latke. Finally, we heard that latkes have high entropy, which was precisely the point I made, which is that they successfully create and form their shape in the presence of high entropy, which is what we need to move forward with quantum computing. Let me conclude with a rousing chant of USA, USA, latkes, latkes, USA, 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 latkes, latkes, USA. Thank you very much.
All right. Any more jousting that's going to go on? All right. Let's try to see if we've learned anything or we have a winner out of all this. Let's start with Team Latke. All of those that think this was the more persuasive arguments, holler. Pretty good, pretty good. And how about Team Hamentaschen? I'm kind of hard of hearing, so I think it was tied. I heard it just equal.
You're on Team Matzah.
And in the event of a tie, we have participation awards for everyone because, you know, I didn't go to MIT and this is not a meritocracy for me. So we want to say thank you to all of the professors who joined us this evening and also to moderator Bob Ferrara. And also, I'm going to make her stand up. Where's Abigail? Abigail spent lots of time during IAP emailing all of the professors to get them to agree to join us this evening, and without her, this would not have happened. So, so we have these lovely trophies for all of them, which I will hand out momentarily. And I will ask our, also thank you very much to our lovely volunteers in our costumes, Dolly and Bessie. I'm going to ask them to each to grab one of the raffle tickets on behalf of your team. They don't say anyone's name, so you are totally unbiased.
Okay, so for the Latke, 769111. Oh.
Who got it?
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Josh, we'll get you a...
And for the Hamentaschen, we have 769117.
All right. All right. That's all. Please enjoy the food outside.